Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, live here from the all-American city of the town of Morrisville. In our World Edition, we talk about news from around the world, discuss innovation, and talk about what we can do to build back better and stronger during and after this pandemic, if it ever ends. Today, I want to talk about the enduring power of the Me Too movement. But before I do, I want to remind everyone that today in Morrisville is S'moresville, as we are going to be campfires this evening as we celebrate our National S'mores Day here in town of Morrisville. So yesterday, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, heir to the political dynasty, the Cuomo family, son of the late Governor Mario Cuomo, ended his term as governor in disgrace as he resigned amidst numerous accusations from over a dozen women that he had conducted acts of sexual harassment and misconduct. This was a fall from grace that many of us did not see coming. A year and a half ago, the governor, who was at the height of leadership in New York, turns out had underreported deaths at COVID nursing homes. And shortly after, the first accuser came forward, Lindsey Boland. Her accusations were dismissed and tarnished by the Cuomo administration, but then others came forward in an investigation by the New York Attorney General. Now, we haven't seen or heard the evidence, but facing looming impeachment and calls from every lawmaker in his state, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the President of the United States, Governor Cuomo eventually saw that he was in a cul-de-sac and his only way out was to resign. But the point I want to make today about this monologue, is to take a look back at previous accusations of sexual harassment. You can look back 30 years to when Anita Hill accused Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, at that time a nominee. There were hearings. It was a little bit embarrassing, but eventually it moved on and Thomas was confirmed. It seems like decades ago, a lifetime ago, when the President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton, conducted acts of sexual misconduct in the Oval Office. He was tried for perjury. He was not impeached. He went on to be reelected and still is seen campaigning for his wife, a presidential candidate, and headlining Democratic fundraisers. Harvey Weinstein was the first one to go for Me Too. Then you had Al Franken, who had to resign. And recently, the Brett Kavanaugh, the most recent, a new Supreme Court justice. The point I'm trying to make is that the power of the Me Too movement has really grown. People are looking into these matters, investigating them. And a politician, regardless of whether dynasty he's from, whether it's the Clintons, whether it's the Kennedys, whether it's the Cuomos, they are not able to get out of these scandals anymore. These issues cannot be washed under the rug. As we open up our conversation today, though, we need to have a discussion of what is the litmus test for investigating sexual conduct. What are the behaviors that we need to be watching for in business leaders, political leaders? And former President Trump was accused of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. President Biden was accused of this during the campaign, but where there's just not enough evidence to warrant an investigation. We'll be discussing this. But the fact of the matter is this: the Me Too movement is here to stay. Its power has swept this nation like a big wave about to topple any politician. The last casualty, the heir apparent to the Cuomo legacy, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, let's bring in our guests, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, Mark Lee, and I forgot to end in my monologue that now Kathy Hochul will become the first female governor in New York history. So, Mark Lee.
Yes, but we got Shaquille here and everything. And actually, you were bringing up some interesting points and all of that. One of them being definitely, I remember the Clarence Thomas case. I was actually helping a author friend of mine here in Durham, who I believe has unfortunately passed on and everything, but she was actually part of that case and everything. It was actually one of the witnesses in that trial that went on with Clarence Thomas. So definitely she had shared with me some of the insight even during that time. And of course, you mentioned that our current president has had some accusations thrown at him as well. So there may be some people that may be wondering, will those accusations resurface? Definitely, will people start seeing Tara Reid's name come back up? And so on that note, I'm going to throw it to Shaquille. So is this just going to be one of several of the Democrats that are going to fall or have issues?
Shaquille, before we begin, I just wanted to, first of all, as you've observed this entire process in the governor, Cuomo, what are your thoughts about this? Was his resignation a surprise? Do you think this was warranted, or I just want to get your opinion?
I don't think it was warranted as far as, justice being served. I think he had to do it because of the political pressure. And I think that realistically, it was highly probable that he was going to be impeached. So who wants to be impeached, right? So resigning, probably made sense politically, for not just for him, but also for the party. Look, Richard Nixon was likely to have been impeached. He resigned to prevent that. So,
yeah,
I think that's the politics of it. And what a great achievement for women, right? Because we've got the first female governor of New York. That's just like some of the reports I've been reading today. We had a prime minister here in Australia, the first female prime minister of this country, and in Australia, the political party can actually have a leadership spill and remove a sitting prime minister and put somebody else there. And I think that the general feeling in Australia was that she wasn't legitimately the prime minister, that she didn't win an election to get there. And then when she did have an election a couple of years later, she had minority government. And, so a lot of people don't really feel as though that was a legitimate victory. I think you're going to see that if Kamala Harris was to step up into the president's office, if Joe Biden was to step down, it just doesn't have the air of legitimacy about it. And I think that to try to claim that this is some great win for women in New York, that they've got the first female governor, let her win the next election. And then there's some legitimacy behind that. But, getting those sort of positions by default, I don't think that proves any advancement for women. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite.
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, like I said, I was thought he was going to dig in further than he did, but I understand what Shaquille said, that definitely there was a lot of pressure to him to step down, and definitely a lot of folks were thinking that it was going to damage the party and all of that, the Democratic Party, that is. So after thinking about it in long detail, then I decided that it actually made a lot of sense for him to step down for the benefit both of the state as well as for the benefit of the larger national party. But that actually comes back to the question that I had thrown at Shaquille earlier and everything, which is that, in the political landscape, we do see a lot of mudslinging and things of that nature on both sides, the Republican and the Democratic side. So I am wondering, are we going to see new accusations coming out, and even some of those old accusations resurfacing? So I mentioned the name Tara Reid, who is the one that made the accusations toward President Biden. So I'm wondering if, from an international perspective, that is one of the things that people are afraid of, not just here in the country, but also internationally. So, Shaquille, I'll toss it to you and ask you, do you think that we're going to see even more of this kind of digging into people's personal lives from both parties, and it becoming kind of a mud bath, for lack of a better term?
Look, I think there's no question that there's going to be continuing allegations. I think this is really problematic, actually. So, firstly, let me just say with Andrew Cuomo, look, sorry, guys, I'm going to have to take this call. It's a business call. I'll be back.
Okay. He's got
keep
to take
going,
a
buddy.
business call.
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to have to just multitask here today a little bit, but I'll keep going, Mark.
Yeah, but like I said, I'm curious to see what he says when he comes back. But yes, definitely, as more and more people think about the Me Too movement and about just kind of like these accusations out there. We've even seen it here in this state and everything, whether that was with Cunningham or whether that was with Reverend Gatewood or a number of other folks. So I am curious to see if people are going to dig out old accusations and whether that's going to impact some campaigns and also people digging up new allegations as well. Definitely, we've got a lot of things going on in that regards, but we've also got our buddy from Canada joining the conversation. So maybe he's got some thoughts about it as well, since it's our northern neighbor. So Sasha, glad to see you here. Glad to have this conversation. We're talking about Andrew Cuomo stepping down and resigning from New York as the governor, and the first female governor for that state getting ready to step in and all of that. So what are your thoughts about Andrew Cuomo's resignation? I do remember that in several of our conversations, it seemed like you thought that he might, as I did, dig in his heels and everything, but I guess that pressure from outside was too much and he definitely stepped down. But wondering your thoughts about the fact that he did this on yesterday and a lot of folks may have been caught off guard.
Well, there was a lot of pressure from outside, number one. Number two, what I underestimated, or actually I was not aware of the fact that in New York, unlike as federal impeachment, you are being removed as soon as the impeachment articles are being filed, the impeachment hearing is getting ready. They are not waiting for the result of that. You are being removed just because of the hearing. So that's why, technically speaking, even if he wanted to stay, and I thought that he should have stayed until proven guilty, but here there is no proof required. The impeachment takes care of it.
Yeah.
Just impeachment, and you're out of the office. Even if 5 years away in court would be found that there is no sufficient evidence and he is not guilty at all, too little, too late, and it just doesn't work. So he had no choice as to resign. That's
I hear you and everything. I want to bring Shaquille back into the conversation. One of the things that you were saying, Shaquille, was, and I know you had to take that business call. We cannot stop business from going on. That's very important and all of that. But you were referring to kind of the impact, and Steve alluded to it as well, of the Me Too movement. So I'd love to hear from everybody as to whether the Me Too movement, which is definitely about in their mind, women's rights and things along that line, whether it has been a benefit to society or a harm to society. And the Me Too movement isn't just a national movement, meaning in the United States, but we're seeing Me Too kind of philosophies throughout the world. And sometimes they're even impacting countries that have traditional kind of views that are not necessarily women friendly, for lack of a better term, because I have some friends that are from Pakistan and some of that area of the country, and I know that they are sometimes glad to see Me Too because they're feeling that it's giving them more rights in countries that have had very repressive rules toward women. But at the same time, those are countries that have been used to having that kind of very highly man-oriented society and all of that. So I was just wondering your thoughts about the Me Too movement, not just here, but internationally, because I do know that I've got a couple of comedian friends that have Pakistani roots, one that now lives here in the United States in LA, and the other that actually is a dentist still in Pakistan. But definitely wondering your thoughts about the international aspect of Me Too and what it's doing.
Well, before, I'm not going to make much of a comment on Me Too and feminism in Muslim majority countries and Middle Eastern countries and developing countries, because I think you're dealing with a whole different situation. As far as what we're dealing with in the West, I think that this is really a problem with feminism today, as well as the Me Too movement today, which is that the idea of trying to ensure that women have got equal rights, that women have a right to expect that they're going to be safe, that they're not going to be harassed when they're in the workplace. Those are all legitimate things. That women should be paid similarly to men, they should have similar opportunities, that sort of stuff. I think that that's all reasonable, and there isn't really anybody on the other side of that. It's not as though there is a bunch of men out there saying, "Oh no, we want to oppress women." Okay, that's just not what's happening. But there is an element within the group that call themselves feminists that seek to destroy men. They're not seeking to try to make sure things are equal. They're not seeking to further, women's rights and help women to go into careers that are traditionally male dominated. They're just out to destroy men, and they really walk around with a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah,
and I think with the Me Too movement. Sorry, Steve. I think with the Me Too movement, this is a real problem where, the suggestion being made essentially is that if you're a rich, powerful man, don't you dare date or attempt to date somebody who is below you on the socioeconomic scale. Because to do so, if she says no, either right now or later on down the track, in 10 years, in 20 years from now, if she says, look, I felt like he was such a powerful guy and I couldn't say no, then you're gonna face some serious repercussions for your career. And the idea that consenting women who are adults can't consent to a sexual liaison, I think that's very dangerous. And what you're actually seeing is you're seeing a lot of men who are reluctant to spend time with women alone. They're reluctant to employ women in positions where they're going to have a lot of close contact with that woman. You're actually seeing that as a trend. And then women say, well, we're being discriminated against. But what do you expect? There has to be a balance. And I don't think the balance has been found yet. I think we will find the balance, but I don't think it's been found yet. And I think people are still trying to find their feet.
Hey, Shaquille, and I'm actually going to ask it and throw it to Sasha as well. But, if you talk to people in the feminism or in the feminist movement, they will tell you that there is not one style of feminism. It's like saying that, all African Americans are alike and that it's a monolithic society and things of that nature. And they will actually probably argue with you that what you're talking about is more along the lines of radical feminism, which is definitely a philosophy that emphasizes the patriarchal roots of inequality and more socially, more specifically, the way that women are dominated by a man. But that is a branch of feminism, and I'm not even sure that it's the dominant branch, because like I said, even if you look it up online, they will tell you that there are 3 branches of feminism that exist out there and all of that, and that they will even give you the different types of feminism that exist.
That's probably very correct what you're saying, but unfortunately, the standard, if you're a man who wants to protect himself and make sure that you're not breaching any laws or you're not doing anything that could potentially come back to bite you later on, isn't to adhere to what mainstream feminists want. It is to make sure that the radicals can't go after you for anything. And look, Cuomo's resignation speech, he was a bit defiant in what he said, and to be honest with you, I actually kind of agree with some of the stuff that he said there. Like, okay, well, I kissed a woman on the cheek at a wedding. The fact that years later that's coming up as a form of harassment. What are we talking about?
I think that comes down. I'm gonna give a couple points, jump off for a minute, and come back so we can do some jabbing. But I think at the end of the day, that's a good point, Shaquille. I mean, what we have to find out is what warrants or crosses the line to be construed as sexual harassment. So does that mean moving forward for any of us, you can't touch a woman, you can't kiss a woman, you can't hug a woman, unless it's your mother or your wife. And would that come back to haunt you? Could somebody come and say he inappropriately touched me, right? And then all of a sudden, and what needs to be proven in court of law?
The thing with Cuomo is whilst I think the situation that he finds himself in is wrong, he doesn't get any sympathy for me because he wasn't prepared to stand up for men and stand up and say, hang on, this is going too far. He signed the very laws that he's now caught up in. He signed them into law as the governor. And so, it's quite telling that not only did he sign them into law, but the allegations aren't actually that he did all these things since that law existed. He signs the law in, and then it's being retrospectively applied. So you've got to have a crystal ball to find out whether the way you are acting today, is that going to be judged poorly in 20 years from now? And if you are at all famous, or you go into politics, you're an actor, whatever you might be, the legacy you leave, how is that going to be judged in 100 years from now when you're no longer around? because that's what we're seeing now, tearing down statues, trying to rewrite history. So look, he doesn't get much sympathy from me, as I said. But yes, let's define what we're talking about. If we're going to talk about sexual harassment, what is it exactly? What's acceptable and what's not? Because if it's going to be something as simple as you cannot kiss somebody on the cheek, let's make sure that we know that. But what you're going to find, and I know from my own personal experience, is if I've got friends around and they're male friends, I put my arm around them, whack them on the back, whatever. It's not going to be a problem because there's nobody's going to suggest that there's anything sexual there. But with a woman, I'm going to shake a hand. And I can tell you that most women don't like that. But that's what happens when you have these kinds of laws and you have radicals that just go and push an ideology, so-called on behalf of whatever minority they claim to be representing.
And we're going to go to Sasha, then I'm going to jump off and come back. But I think the other point is that, we had, Clarence Thomas, then you have Bill Clinton, you have, recently Justice Kavanaugh, you had allegations against Trump, you had allegations against Biden. Now with Biden and Trump, those came and then they went. Now, was that because there just wasn't an investigation? And are you going to go back? Because somebody could come in and say, Shaquille harassed me, Steve harassed me. They could just be making it up. So, that's something.
Maybe it's the hatred for Trump overshadowed it. But let's talk about Clinton, though. If we talk about the Clinton Monica Lewinsky situation, forget about whether he perjured himself. Just the ethics of that. You might argue that he shouldn't do that with a junior staffer who's 22 years old. And look, 22 is very young. However, she's legally an adult. And I'm sure that given the opportunity to be in a sexual liaison with the president, a lot of 22-year-old girls would say, absolutely, cool, how great would that be? He's charming, he's good-looking, etc.
And in that situation, it was consensual. So he didn't push her on himself as the president. So that might have been one reason why the American people forgave him, although I think it was ludicrous that he, anyway, Sasha, what are your thoughts about this? We're going to move on to another point.
Okay, I don't think that I will get a lot of friends because of I will say exactly what I think. That historically, women are obviously inferior to men in many respects. As inferior creatures, they had to fight for their place, but they couldn't find because men are much more powerful than they are. So they created all kinds of traps and institutionalize them, not only to get equal with men, but even to have advantage over men in workplace, in academia, everywhere else. And right now, men have to hide anywhere to avoid contacts, to be on public or else, and so on. And it makes a situation really unbearable. And I think it's time to address that forcefully and put things back in place where they belong.
There's some things
back in the kitchen, Sasha. Is that where they belong? I'm not going to agree with you that women are inferior on physical strength. Possibly, yes, but in most cases, yes, women don't have the same strength as us. But there's lots of things that women can do much better than what men can. And I think we just have different.
Does that include creative endeavors? Do you know many composers, women? Do you know many artists, women? Do you know anything? What they are unable to create anything except the kids.
I can't agree with you on Sasha. I know a lot of women composers and a lot of great women musicians who are doing some incredible works that are comparable to Bach and Beethoven and others, and definitely are doing some amazing works in all kinds of genres. So no, I can't buy that one and everything. So
if you're referring to those sorts of composers, Bach and Beethoven, all those sorts of things. I mean, let's look at the time. I mean, of course, women's achievements in those times weren't as great as men because they couldn't do a lot of things. Oftentimes, women couldn't get much of an education. They were getting married at 12 years of age. Their roles were different. I think a lot of women talk about that. Hey, we've been disadvantaged over a period of time, and so therefore there are not a lot of achievements that women have on the scale of achievements because it's still catching up. I don't think that that's an inferiority thing. And I think as well, if I may just say, that it's probably reasonable to look at the traditional roles of women and men historically in men going out and working and bringing in the money for the family, and the woman that's staying home looking after the house and the kids, that sort of stuff. But we have evolved as a society, and women have got, women are playing a much greater part in our societies today than what they were before. That's why I didn't really want to make a comment, Mark, on Pakistan or some of those other emerging countries, because those women haven't yet reached the same sort of level as they have in Western countries. But again, to come back to the Me Too movement, I think that some women, not all feminists, but some who walk around with a chip on their shoulder, as if nothing has ever improved, as if every woman is incapable of saying no or giving consent and all that sort of stuff. Every woman is oppressed. Those women, I think, do a lot of damage. And it's not just that they're doing damage to men. I think they're doing damage to women. I think there's a lot of women that don't like what they do and say, you don't speak for me. And that's where the problem is.
No, I hear you, and I definitely agree with you on that. I see you're back.
I'm back.
Definitely,
we're going to continue this conversation. I mean, I think we're going to get into the first jab of the day, and then we got a couple of jabs today, but first let's begin with the bad news in America. 100,000 cases of Delta variant. Our vaccinations are around 58%. Okay, and the Delta variant in the southern states like Louisiana, Georgia, Texas, Florida, really going rampant. And while this is all going on, and the scientists are saying mask up to prevent spread and vaccinate, we have two governors, Republican governors, Greg Abbott from Texas, DeSantis from Florida, who are unwavering in their opposition to mask mandates. I believe, as the first new jab I want to throw out there, that these governors should be removed from office. They are being negligent in their duties as the chief ministers of their state. How could you do that if people are dying? Regardless, I mean, even if it was a Democratic governor, I mean, Shaquille, let's jab away. Defend the governors of these states. Why, in God's name, with this virus running rogue, would you say don't wear a mask?
Well, I don't know why I'm being given the role as a great defender of Republican governors, but let me just
play devil's advocate.
Let me address a couple of points here, right? Because I want to come back to Cuomo. I'm going to tell you, I'm so annoyed. Like I watched that resignation, and this morning my time, and I was just like, really, right? Now last year, because remember, just like with Biden. He was a Democrat, a very prominent Democrat. He can do no wrong. Last year, he whinges and complains that he doesn't have enough ventilators and Trump hasn't done this and Trump hasn't done that. And, he gives this thing, well, Trump, you choose who's going to live and who's going to die. And then doesn't use the ventilators that Trump gave him, doesn't use the medical ship that Trump gave him, sends people back into nursing homes where the thing spreads like wildfire. Then he claims this year that COVID, and he said it very slowly, COVID didn't get into nursing homes because of patients with COVID going to those nursing homes. No, of course not. That wouldn't be the cause. What caused it was staff members going in and out of the nursing homes. That's what caused the spread of COVID. So did we criticize Cuomo? Oh, no, not at all. Let's give him an Emmy. Let's give a politician an Emmy for their TV appearances. And then you had reporters on the ABC, on CNN, on channels like that saying, oh, he's so good looking. I'm not a heterosexual or homosexual. I'm a Cuomo-sexual. And these kind of absolutely ridiculous things like that are being said about him, okay? And the rest of us are supposed to take that seriously. Now, was there criticism of Democrat governors when they got it wrong last year? No. But all of a sudden this year, when the governors of Texas and Florida are doing what they were doing before, which is respecting people's personal rights, all of a sudden, they're akin to being murderous dictators and madmen. Masks work, do they? I mean, do they? If you're vaccinated, why do you need a mask? I mean, the science.
Well, I think that's the confusion. I was under the same impression. I was going to have a mass bonfire. I was smiling again, feeling really good, and now I had to wear a mask for 7 hours yesterday at a city council meeting. Felt awful. I have a hard time talking with the mask. And,
but the question I would have for you, though, Steve, is if you're going to call for the removal of sitting governors of two, very popular states, two of the most popular states in the union. On what science exactly? I mean, Fauci said last year at one point, he said, well, if one mask is good, two masks is even better. I mean, where's the sense of this other than it just being
I think I'm going to go back to Sasha. Part of the problem, I think, is that there's been so much information coming from different sides. First we were told, you need to wear a mask, and if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. Now they're saying, what I'm hearing is that you can get the breakthrough COVID, even if you're vaccinated. Your symptoms may be less, and you might end up, passing it on to someone else, and that you could wear a mask, right? Now, the other thing, so there's so much, not to play light on this or anything, but the other day I was reading a big history book, and it's like probably, really thick. I'm talking like this big, like a law school horn book. And I fell asleep. I fell asleep on my chest, the book. And I woke up scared as hell because I woke up, I could barely breathe. I go, oh my God, I'm dying of COVID. And then I realized I had the book on my chair. So, you start hearing about the symptoms, you get paranoid.
If you could just humor me for a second, I just want to have this last little jab here. Okay. So, Steve, I love how you Democrats love the abortion rules and such avid supporters of Roe versus Wade. Now, what did the Republican Supreme Court say in Roe versus Wade? They said the question of where exactly life begins. This is part of what they said. The question of where exactly life begins is a question that should be answered by the family, by the woman and her doctor, without any government interference, right? Healthcare is not the purview of government. But when it comes to the coronavirus, those very same Democrats that absolutely love abortions and individual rights and individual choices over their healthcare all of a sudden want to impose state-sanctioned healthcare on the population with no reference to the science at all.
That's a conversation for another time. I believe in a woman's right to choose, but let's get back to this before we jab again. And Sasha, any last words? We're going to do the next jab. My thing is, I think these governors are being irresponsible, and I think that they need to at least not work against having masks. Maybe at least say, consider as an option, mandated for indoors when public buildings, and that's what they're doing in North Carolina.
You can't be a part-time dictator. Either you respect people's rights or you don't. Sasha.
But they're playing politics, Sasha.
Do you really want to hear what I'm going to say? I'm not so sure.
Yes, we really want to hear you, Sasha. I want to hear what you have to say.
Are the people complete idiots to say that, Fauci said one day one thing, the next day next thing, and they change their opinion or so on? We are living in absolutely new world where there is COVID-19 taking so many shapes and so many things are being learned almost daily about it, never mind the variants like Delta and others. Of course, there is no single-minded policy that dictates everything from A to Z, what you have to do every moment, every time, every minute or so on. It's changing, and it will keep changing, depends on the real situation in real time. So why people are making kind of a joke out of Fauci saying, yesterday he said this, and today he said that. He's full of shit. He's not reliable. We shouldn't even listen to him. That's not true, because situation is changing. So his recommendations are changing. It could be changed once a month, once a week, or maybe even 24 hours.
But Sasha, that's the whole point, right? The truth of the matter is that neither Fauci nor anybody else actually knows. And I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. I'm happy for the health departments to say, look, we don't know. We're doing our best. We'll give you the information as we know it. But that's not what's being suggested. I can choose to wear a mask. I can choose to wash my hands and do all these different things. The question is whether or not government should be allowed to force people against their will to do certain things and then try to use as justification for that force. We know as scientific fact this, and this, when they don't know as scientific fact this, and this. That's where the
Still, I think they know scientific facts as information becoming available. Based on that latest information, they have certain facts, but the new information, let's say tomorrow, can adjust these facts quite seriously, and you have to act on it, and not to see, well, we said this is right, do it. No,
Sasha,
because new
how
information,
frequently,
you have to do it.
how frequent? I mean, I would argue that the time when your rights and of course the ability to restrain U.S. government if you're a U.S. citizen, that those constitutional rights, the time when you need them is when you need them, and that for them to try and be suspended at that time negates the purpose of having those rights. You answer this question for me. In all of your life, throughout Europe, throughout Russia and its predecessor USSR, throughout the United States and Canada, have you ever known a government that has managed to get more power that has then relinquished that power subsequently? Have you ever known that to happen? Have you ever known politicians?
No, I agree with you. No, that's not the case. Of course, once they grab more power, they are hungry for even more power, and so on and on and on.
Right.
And we are talking about maybe some insignificant things like this mask wearing or vaccines or so on. It's kind of an issue. I'm taking philosophical approach. Those who have to die, they will die anyway from coronavirus or from other causes or so.
Hey, folks. Folks, just really quickly, I was going to bring in a point that a friend of mine brought in on their social media site, and this is the way they defended the answer. And I'm going to even shout out the gentleman's name because I've known him for a while and everything. So D. Anderson is the gentleman's name, and everything is on the Nextdoor site. And one of the things he said was that science, according to the CDC, according to the CDC, masks don't work. Science, according to the CDC, masks work. And what his answer was this demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of science. Science makes theories based on evidence available at the time. When new evidence comes along, the theory changes. You cannot judge the accuracy of prior theories based on new data as wrong if they were correct based on what was known at the time. This is what happened here. Also, saying science is a matter of politics is also a laugh. No matter who is president, gravity is always gravity. V will equal IR. Water will be wet. Politics does not change scientific facts.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great way to end. Yeah,
my point still remains. Of course, the science changes. What is being suggested is that the government uses force to impose something on the population without knowing that the science that they're using or the theories that they're using are actually true.
But it's been proven. The science shows that wearing a mask can prevent the spread.
It hasn't been proven at all. It hasn't been.
What I'm saying, it's been proven.
Well, okay. Let's talk about a couple of things. Right? Let's just talk about the mask. I'll just say through because I know you want to move on. Even if you've got N95 masks, which most people aren't wearing, most people are just wearing surgical masks.
Yeah,
but let's just say they're wearing N95 masks. Okay. N95 masks, the pores that allow air to come in and out are still 5,000 times bigger than the coronavirus. So the coronavirus has no issues coming in and out of those masks. Masks that are worn incorrectly cause all sorts of other healthcare issues. And we're seeing really silly applications of masks. We're seeing government mandates, not just here in Australia, in other parts of the world, where they'll say, you must wear a mask when you're traveling in a car, even if you're traveling by yourself. You must wear a mask when you're walking outside. At the moment here in Sydney, you have to wear a mask when you're outside walking on a footpath. Why? You're outside. So when you start talking about all these little things, remember, government doesn't just pass rules that cater for every individual circumstance. They're blanket rules. The law is always messy, and of course it's been politicized. And then when people who generally have some level of mistrust for government, people who want smaller government tend to be on the Republican side. So all of a sudden it becomes a Republicans are terrible people issue. And that does such a disservice if we're going to talk about healthcare issues in the United States.
And Shaquille, I don't know that it's necessarily just a Republican and a Democratic issue. I was on one of my other sites that I surf around looking on news and everything. I'll just go ahead and say what it was. It was Clubhouse. But definitely I was on there, and that's one of the things they were saying about even the way the laws are changing now because the powers that be at Facebook and Google and other places like that are meeting regularly with the government in control now. Before that, they were meeting with the government in control when Trump was in control. And during this time, because they now have access to the powers that be, that's why we're seeing these kind of new rules that those lobbies would like to see placed even in the infrastructure bill. So they were talking about how, like, there was, and some of these rules could be good, like the age rules about the way we're restricting what people can have based on their age. And if they're youngsters, they don't have as much access as they did in the early days of the internet. But a lot of what they were saying was because that is the powers that be having access to the political forces.
That's so ridiculous. So in the adult sites, for example, they put these walls up, say, "Are you 18?" A 13-year-old that wants to look at Pornhub isn't going to go, "No, I'm not." They're just going to go, "Yeah, I'm over 18. Click." I mean, these sorts of rules, they're just silly. They really are.
I'm gonna have to leave. I'm leaving about.
I think they're doing the right thing.
I'm leaving around 10 minutes early today, guys, because I got to go to Raleigh. But I'm gonna close out my monologue a little bit early, my last jab. But let's go to the next issue. I'm so proud of President Biden executing his first act of bipartisanship by getting through the United States Senate as a Democrat president the $1.3 trillion infrastructure plan. Wonderful. Way to go, Mr. President. What do you think, guys? This is a step forward. We're sharpening our pencils. We signed this. Now it's on to the House. Hopefully it'll pass. And then it'll go to his signature. And of course, I know Shaquille's not happy about the $3.5 trillion social safety net, but they didn't pass that in the law. That's just a blueprint. Shaquille, are you happy? The president delivered. He is bipartisan.
Of course, he's not bipartisan. He's not bipartisan at all.
Smoking Joe.
Firstly, let me say, look, I don't like seeing the government expenditure. I really don't. However, I think that at least this part of it is something that the American people would have wanted, and I think voted on. I think that whether I agree or not, I think that is the correct thing to do as far as the wishes of the American people, and it should be respected. So yeah, it's a good thing that's passed. My hope is, and it's a silly hope to have, but my hope is that 1.3 trillion is actually spent on proper things, on proper infrastructure, on actually delivering the things that it's supposed to deliver, and not, I haven't read the act, I'm probably not going to, but I mean, I hope it's not full of earmarks. I hope it's not, going to have a whole heap of pork in it that has nothing to do with infrastructure. And it's not just actually about, hey, building bridges and roads. It's, okay, what contractors are actually getting the contracts to build those bridges and roads or maintain them? Does a local politician have an ownership stake in it? What oversight do we have over that? All of those are really important considerations. But yes, look, it's a good thing it's passed. I'm glad he's got it passed. I think that's a positive thing for the American people. As for spending the other $3.5 trillion, well, I'm glad that hasn't been because he sort of backtracked. He said he wasn't going to do it. Then he tried to put it in and say you need both. And then he backtracked again. So,
Shaquille, really quickly, and I actually brought this up yesterday when you weren't here and everything. But two things. One is, what politician ever, because I can't even think of one, maybe George Washington, but I'm sure he had some pork also. But I don't know a bill yet that hasn't had some sort of pork in it and all of that. I think that's something that's just part of the political landscape, and I don't care whether you're here in the United States or Australia or wherever. I just think that's part of what politicians do, is they add things like that into their bills just because they want to do that as part of the nature of being a politician. But one of the things that I mentioned yesterday was that several of the publications said that this was one of the largest social safety nets since the New Deal. And I know that you have definitely said some things about safety nets and things of that nature. So I just wanted your thoughts about the fact that there is some people that are feeling that this could be more welfare type programs because it's supposed to protect folks that might be having issues, whether it's around education, whether it's around homes, whether it's around a number of other things. But they did call it, and I know that you're not the biggest fan because you've made that clear, of social safety nets. But I just wondered your thoughts of hearing it even described that way, because that would put it in this category of like maybe Kennedy, or before that, the New Deal.
Okay, now hang on a second. I'm not opposing social safety nets, as a blanket rule. I think we should have them. But there's a difference between having social safety nets that people can rely on in a time of need and people abusing social safety nets. Okay, there's a really big difference between the two. There's also a really big difference when we talk about healthcare, for example, between making sure that everybody has access to healthcare and saying to some people, okay, because you've got more money, you can afford to have procedures that other people can't afford to have. We as a government are not prepared to pay for that procedure. But because we don't want you to have a procedure that other people don't have access to, it means that you can't have it. And that's what happens in Canada. That's what happens in Australia. If I want a particular procedure done and it's not sitting on the Medicare benefit scheme, I can't have it. I can't even pay to have it. Okay. So, I think that those sorts of things are real issues. And I just want to remind you, prior to the Great Depression, prior to the Green New Deal, Social Security, that was nothing. That was not something that the American people were calling for. Okay, all these sort of safety nets, there was no big call for it, and everybody wants to talk about the positive things that happened. Yes, a lot of positive things happened because of the New Deal, but there were some negative things as well, and people like to gloss over them. And when they gloss over them, there's no attempt made to try to fix them. I believe that in a wealthy country, all wealthy countries do this. They want to have more social services provided by government. And the question should always be, how is it going to be paid for? What is fair when it comes to paying for these services and generating revenue for the government? How are the services going to be delivered, and how do we do so in a way that gives people the most amount of choice? And I think there are ways to do that. I think that's where the debate should be. Just $3.5 trillion to spend on anything is ridiculous.
Well,
you were not accurate presenting how health system in Canada works. Yes, there are certain procedures which are not covered by, for example, in Ontario's Ontario health insurance plan. But if it's not covered, then it means that you can elect not to do this procedure and do something else, or you can elect and pay yourself for that procedure because it's not covered by Health Ontario. But it's not that you just can't get the procedure.
Sasha, there are some things that, yes, you can pay to do. Yeah. There are some things, though, that Canadians will fly to Germany to get done because they can't pay to get it done in Canada, or they go to the United States to get it done because they can't pay to get it done in Canada because it's not allowed in the first place.
Okay, they would fly elsewhere because it's not available in Canada. That's what you're saying?
Not that it's not available; they're not allowed to have the service or the procedure in the first place.
Hold on 1 second. Let's get to this because I think that Steve's actually got to. I hate to cut off. I think Steve's got to actually jump off, and we can actually continue the conversation before I bring up the lovely ending and everything. But I think that Steve had a point to make, and I know he's got time limits, so I just want to.
Well, I guess I can wait. If we could stop a little early, I always like to end with my last job. So rather than leave early, why don't we end with mine? We'll end the show with my. I think it's better that way. The point I want to make is that, I think that, it's just. I'm going to close out with the importance of infrastructure, and I think that the debate we've continued having the show is. The infrastructure, what is infrastructure? How do you define infrastructure versus the social needs of our country, which is still an issue. People on the street, people not able to get work, people being evicted from their apartments, housing prices, at least in this area where we live, going up in the urban areas tremendously. This is a problem. And, how do we address these issues? That's the age-old debate, right? I mean, do we do it through taxes? Do we do it through infrastructure? But remember that Roosevelt, made a lot of investments in the New Deal and the social services that maybe grew larger than what we had imagined. But under that, facing the Great Depression, Roosevelt led a great movement to get things done, get airports built, get electricity in rural areas. So I believe we're doing the same thing.
And just to go to your point and everything, I'm just going to give some facts and everything that are even based on how things have gone up. And this is during the COVID era. So, I live here in an apartment complex in Durham, North Carolina, and I can tell you that in the 2.5 years that I have lived here, the rent has gone up $300 and $350. So like I said, if I started at, let's say, $650, it's close to like maybe $1,000 right now. So that is in almost, just think of the percentage of that amount of rent going up and how a lot of people can't afford that kind of rent boost and everything. And therefore, there's got to be efforts to counter what sometimes the private enterprises are doing, because I'm not the only one, but a lot of folks are facing that dilemma when the rent goes up. I forget what that percentage is, but it's a high percentage and all of that. But we've seen that, and there are efforts to get people to curtail, to stop the kind of rate hikes that can go on. And it's not just rent, it can also be in your utilities and a number of other things as well. I did want to just, and I see Shaquille give me that look like he's got a point to make, but I did want to also throw out here the website, because we did get 2 additional people to subscribe. And I know that definitely that's one of the things that Nick is trying to do, is get people to subscribe. So I looked at the subscriptions and saw we got 2 new fans, and I know they're trying to get to 1,000. So that being said, I'm going to put that and roll that across so the folks can like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll get up to 800, because we're not quite at that number. So I'm gonna push a goal and everything in that regard. So definitely just doing that real quick. And if anybody's got any other points, I was just rolling that across the screen.
I'll respond to what you said about rent increases and all those sorts of things. The fact of the matter is that politicians are lazy, useless parasites as a general rule, right? And what they do is they say things that sound good to their base. They say things that sound good, which is going to help them to win another election, and they could not care less whether what they're suggesting is going to work. Okay? If cost of living pressures have increased dramatically for the everyday American, handing them extra money doesn't do anything, because all that's going to do is because there's more money around, it's going to drive inflation, and it's going to leave them in the same position that they were in, probably worse.
Yeah.
So why would the politicians do that? Because they've got economic advisors that can tell them that strategy has never worked. So why do they do it? Because it sounds good. Because they know that they can say to people, hey, we're going to give you an extra X amount of dollars every week. And we go, yeah, that's fantastic. Because it sounds good for right now. Whether it works is a whole different thing. Okay. And I'm going to come back to, Black Lives Matter doesn't speak for me in the same way that feminism doesn't speak for all women. Okay. People that want to, talk about the oppression or the disadvantage that people of color and black people have in Western society, some things that they say, they might have a point, but they don't speak for all of us in everything that they say. And I will bitterly oppose any kind of program that is going to say, as a criteria for this program, we need to judge your skin color. If you are black, you get it. If you're white, you don't. Okay? I refuse to participate in any kind of program that reduces me as a person down to my skin color. Okay? I'm not doing it. And I didn't appreciate that sort of behavior when it was used against me when I was a young child. And I'm not going to accept getting an advantage over another person, okay, because of my skin color today. Not going to happen. So some of these programs, some of these safety nets that you're talking about, the references are constantly about skin color. It's not about let's tackle poverty. It's let's talk about black poverty. And that is so unfair. It is so unfair to those millions of white kids growing up in places like Little Rock, Arkansas, living in trailer parks. They deserve the opportunities as well.
I would make 2 points to what you just said. One is that having friends that are in that economics field and being economists on the academic side and things of that nature, I don't know any of them that talk about poverty strictly in an African-American perspective. When they're talking about poverty, they're talking about it across the races, across the ethnicities, and across the other sides of the poverty line. So I'm just saying that the ones that I've talked to, and I've talked to several of them.
That's not policy. I'm not saying economists feel that way. I'm saying that that's what the policies are. Policies are that these programs are designed to help people of color and not to help in any way people who are white because of systemic racism. Okay? You're exactly right. Economists don't agree with that. So why are they doing it? Because it sounds good. That's why.
Okay. And the other thing that I was going to say along those lines is if there is a field or there are things in there that there is not a level playing field, and there are still fields out there that do not have a level playing field, then I have no problem with there being efforts to make that field more level and things of that nature. There are fields that African Americans are not as strong in. Engineering. So
are you telling me that a 5-year-old kid who grows up in a poor black area and a 5-year-old kid who grows up in a poor white area, that white kid has an advantage in engineering because of the color of their skin? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm just saying that in terms of like the job market, that there are less.
No.
What I'm saying is that if you're trying to level the playing field in terms of the job market, that's what I'm talking about in leveling the playing field. If there are more, if you do not have enough African American engineers and you have a certain amount that you want, I have no problem with us getting to an amount that matches, say, society's population. So, like I said, if we want to get, let's say the population is 20 to 30% African Americans, and you want to get 20 to 30%.
The attempt to do that has failed. It will always fail. It's ridiculous because you are never going to see every single industry be proportionately represented by the same proportion of ethnicity that exists within the society. Okay, that just doesn't happen. We know this just looking at you want a bigger disparity? Here's a bigger disparity for you. If you have a look at the firstborn child and the fourth-born child within the same families, you will find that the fourth-born child is dramatically disadvantaged when it comes to academic achievements. Okay, why is that? We don't know. We can theorize, but it's not surely a society conspiracy to try to oppress the fourth and fifth-born children within families. It's ridiculous to expect these disparities not to
We're going to
exist.
continue these conversations. I'm going to begin my closing last jab, if that's okay. But I did want to thank Shaquille for bringing up some good points. And we're going to have this debate. I'm going to close out, then you guys can continue, or we can end a little bit early today.
We're actually right at, first off, Steve, we're right at the time because it's right at the hour.
I want to invite Shaquille and Sasha and everyone. We have a very special guest tomorrow to celebrate Indian Independence Day, which is this Sunday, the 75th Indian Independence Day in the history of India, the world's largest democracy, Mr. Swadesh Chatterjee, who's a senior advisor to many leaders in the U.S. on the India relationship. It's going to be a fascinating show. We're going to talk about India. We're going to talk about the pandemic. We're going to talk about liberal democracy, illiberal democracy. So, Shaquille, we'd be honored to have you on. And it'll be more of a it'll be a very.
I met the gentleman who was on last time.
Yeah, he's wonderful, and it'll be an engaging discussion. So, no jabbing, and a great opportunity for us to have a wonderful thing. So let's broadcast that out. He'll be with us tomorrow, Mr. Swadesh Chatterjee, Padma Bhushan winner. On that note, I want to give, which is the highest civilian award given by the government of India. I wanted to close out today with, as an elected official and a city councilor, I am absolutely excited about this bipartisan infrastructure deal by the President of the United States. This bill actually will help us achieve the goals that many of our citizens demand of us in Morrisville and cities. Our brand is live, connected, live well. And this infrastructure bill is going to help our citizens connect better to get to places they need, taking congestion off the road with the largest investment in Amtrak and commuter rail in the history of our nation, investing in our bridges, our roads, helping take traffic off the road. It's going to help us with accessibility to high quality education and remote workforces by the investments in broadband. So I commend our president and our senators for making these significant investments. But also will help on the live well part as we deal with climate change, increases in temperature, disruptive weather patterns, fires raging, taking 500,000 acres in California. This bipartisan infrastructure bill actually helps us achieve the goals of reducing carbon emissions through incentivizing more electrical vehicles to be manufactured, providing for over 500,000 electric charging stations, providing for electric buses, and all of these things to encourage renewable and solar power so we can do our part to make sure that we are living in a greener America that can propel new job creation and at the same time investing in our solid infrastructure. I believe that this bipartisan bill will help us live connected and live well, will help us address the concerns that we have in this Research Triangle region that we're growing too fast, that we're not keeping up with their infrastructure. Let's invest in our infrastructure. Let's invest in our green economy. And if we do that, we will enable the United States of America from every city in this nation to have the infrastructure they need. And if we do that, America can catch up. We can be competitive again as we deal with the rising superpower of China. More to come on this next week, but thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the United States Senate for helping us make our country more accessible, more connected, and greener. Thank you. We'll be back next week. We'll be back tomorrow with Mr. Chowji. Thank you so much.